Mr. Eustice, the scandal is now engulfing the government, the media, the police here in this country. Did you have any concept it was going to go this far?
Well, I don't think anyone could have predicted it would go this far. But I do think there's been a problem with our media and the culture we have in our media for many years now, perhaps even decades. Far too much power concentrated in the hands of a few press barons, as they're called. Far too much acceptance on the part of politicians that they need to court the support of these press barons. And I think if something comes out of this, it should be a change in that culture.
But that accusation has been made against your own Prime Minister, that his relationship was far too cosy with News International.
That's right, and I think it's important to note that early on, when David Cameron first became leader of the Conservative Party, he made a very concerted effort to take a different approach. When I was there and others were there, we had a very clear thing, which is that if we were ever invited to News International's global conference that they have once a year, we would have declined because it was important to send a signal that we did not recognise Rupert Murdoch's power and that we would spend far less time having cosy dinners, certainly not divert from our policy agenda to suit the views of a mere newspaper, and that we would stick to our guns, spend as much time as possible to explain to the newspapers what we were doing and why.
Does he have to make an apology for hiring Andy Coulson?
Well, I'm not sure that he does, actually. I think the most important thing to come out of this is that we get the inquiries right. And that's to make sure that if there's been police wrongdoing, then that is uncovered. Because I think one of the most serious accusations in this affair so far is the newspapers might have paid the police for information. And that's really is rank corruption, which should not be tolerated.
Did he make a mistake in hiring Andy Coulson?
Well, with hindsight, I think he would say, yes, he did. But to be fair to him, at the time, there have been police investigations on this. It looked like it was an isolated incident at the News of the World. David Cameron was given assurances by Andy Coulson that actually he did not know about it and knew nothing about it, but had just resigned because it had happened on his watch. So, he reacted to that in good faith. As it turns out, it does now look like there was industrial-scale hacking going on at the News of the World. I think if David Cameron knew now, or known then what he knows now, he probably wouldn't have taken on Andy Coulson.
Do you believe Rebekah Brooks had no idea that phone hacking was going on what appears to be such a massive scale?
Well, I think there are actually real questions both for James Murdoch and Rebekah Brooks, simply because they authorised the payment of, let's say, hush money to important witnesses, to Clive Goodman, who was a journalist who was jailed, and also the publicist Max Clifford. So they obviously knew more than they were prepared to let on, and actually authorised the payments of monies to people to stop them taking this case further. And I think that's quite quickly going to become the main focal point of this investigation.
Well, what should happen to James Murdoch?
Well, I think we have to let the police investigation take its course. He says that he would not have signed off those or authorised those payments if he knew then what he knew now. I think we have to ask the question of him, what is it that he knows now that he didn't know then, and why didn't he know it then?
Should he step down as chairman of B-Sky B while this inquiry is unfolding?
I personally think that his position's not very good just because he authorised those payments.
Others have resigned, though, before this inquiry has even got underway, the public inquiry. So should James Murdoch at least step aside from his duties while it's being investigated?
Well, look, it's an issue that News International have to take on board. My own view is that I think the whole News Corps operation have been quite slow in reacting to this crisis, and they've not wanted people to resign. They've resisted calls for resignation right up until the last minute and then given way. They tried to, refuse to turn up last week, for instance, to they tried to resist calls for them to appear in front of the Select Committee tomorrow. I think that also is something that they then had to concede latterly. I think they actually need to move much more quickly to find the bottom of this crisis than I think they have done to date.
Well, turning to the committee hearings, what are you expecting to hear when they meet tomorrow?
Well, I think it's too early to tell actually what might come out of it. I think one of the problems is because there's now a very, very thorough police investigation going on, I think that all three witnesses will be able to quite reasonably say on quite a few instances, well, this is the subject of a police investigation. I'm afraid we can't comment on that or can't tell you that because it's subject to a police inquiry. And I suspect that tomorrow actually might be a bit of a disappointment and that not much new will come for it and that there will be quite a lot of evasive answers simply because they'll have this natural defence of a police inquiry going on. So I think that tomorrow actually might lead to more heat than light on this particular case.
What do you think the British public and members of Parliament like yourself want to hear from the Murdochs?
I think what I'd really like to know is what they knew and when. I think in particular why they thought it was right to authorise the payments of effectively money to silence other key witnesses on the original investigation. And I think the most startling revelation is News International might have actually paid the police for information. I think that's a very serious accusation as well, and I think we'd need to have answers to that. The only thing I would say as well, though, is that this whole crisis goes far wider than just Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. You know, we have a real cultural problem with our media here. A report by the Information Commissioner a few years ago highlighted serious problems with both newspapers like the Daily Mail and also the Daily Mirror. And there are lots of other newspapers here who've not behaved in a way that we should expect of them. And I hope that out of this we don't just make this a kind of attack on the tallest poppy, if you like, just because Rupert Murdoch tends to own more newspapers than others in Britain. I hope that actually we can get out of this a wholesale realignment of the relationship between the media and politics in Britain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.